In our readings today, in all of them, they point back to God being there and certain situations having to happen for stuff to play out the way it is. Have you ever had something really crazy happen? Like, I have at times been able to walk through the door and somehow got some piece of my clothing caught on the door frame that if I tried to do it 600 times, it would never do it again. Ever had that happen? Well, have you ever thought that things happen in our lives and all of those things precisely have lined up for that to happen? Well, it happens every day like that, but we have a tendency to think it only happens occasionally. What we're going to look at today is we're going back to Acts, and we're looking especially at Corinth and the area around Corinth and everything that had to happen to make Corinth the place that Paul stayed for 18 months. Paul didn't stay anywhere very long, usually because he got beaten up and half killed or thrown out or thrown in jail or something like that. But he stayed in Corinth for 18 months, and this is the reason why he was able to do this. All right, so first of all, we're going to start with a map. And this is the map of the area. And so what you're seeing is over to the right, you're seeing the bottom part of Turkey, and then as you go to the top, that is Greece, and then you're going to come on down, and you're going to see, do you see Athens on there now, and Ephesus, and Troas, Philippi, Thessaloniki? Okay, so you see all of that. So you've got the back part of Turkey, and then you've got this isthmus that's coming over, and then you've got this big part of Greece that's there. And so these are the places. First, Paul went to Troas, and then he went to Ephesus, and then something told him, go on over to Philippi, and he went over to Philippi. And then from there, he went to Thessalonica, and then we know he went to Corinth, and then we know we ended last week where he was up at Athens, and he was on the mount, and he was telling them, this is the unknown God. You've got all of these palaces to the unknown God. I know the unknown God, and the unknown God is God himself, or God's self. And so he's in Athens, and he stays in Athens a little bit, but then he gets kicked out of Athens too. So he goes on up to, you see where the star is? That's where Corinth is. So Athens is the star over here underneath the word Athens, and Corinth is over here. So it doesn't go that far, but he gets to Corinth, and he stays there. And some of the things that make Corinth a place where he could stay is the fact that it is this isthmus. And the fact that it is an isthmus, this is going to come in even tighter on it, is that there were people coming through there constantly. Not only were they going east and west over this isthmus in boats, and we'll talk about that in a minute, which is absolutely, it's really exciting to me. And they can also go north and south land-wise. And so this area, people were going over constantly. And so it was always new people that were coming in. So in the late, well, I'll get to that in a minute. So in Corinth, you have the Saronic Gulf, and then you have another gulf on the other side. And this is a 4-mile area right here. And if you went down around the Peloponnesians, it would take you an extra 10 days. But if you could figure out a way to get over that 4-mile stretch, then it could cut off over a week in your days. So what they did is they decided they needed a road that went there. And so they made the road, and they got these big, basically pieces of trees that they would put the boats on, and then they would pull them across, and there'll be a diagram of that in a minute, pull them across and put them down in the next gulf. So they go one gulf to the other, being pulled by oxen. The other way they could do it is they could take their boat up, and they could completely unload it, and then they could have another boat waiting on the other side and then reload it over there. But even doing that, it was less time. So here's this picture. You can see the boat coming out on the wheels, and it's pulled by all the oxen over these 4 miles, and then it's put back in. And so because of this, there were people again going east and west and north and south. I think that is so cool the way they figured out how to do that. So it let people go all over the place. So what happened was the Romans came in, and they thought Corinth was getting too big and too fancy for itself. And so they came in and they just leveled it completely. So if you went to Corinth today, what you would see are just, it was right on the seaport at that time, and it just got leveled, totally, completely leveled. And so it was that way for a while. And this is just showing you how the boats could come in and then go back out. And the other thing about the boats doing this is the weather wasn't so bad when the boats did this, because they had the land blocking it, where you can see if they had to go all the way down the Peloponnesians, not only would it add time, but it would add weather. And then you can see the north and south foot traffic and how that was easy to go back and forth. So Corinth is, at this point in time, was right there on the ocean, or right there on the Gulf. And that one got leveled. And so what they did in the past is, once something got leveled, they just let it go barren for a while. And the history of way Corinth became Corinth, there's just a whole bunch of myths out there as to how it got that. Some people say it was named after this Greek god, and others will say no, it was named after that Greek god, and we honestly don't know why it was named Corinth, it just was. Perilander was the guy that came up with the Doualcus, which was the name of that 4-mile road that they had. And so that just helped a whole lot. The Romans in 146 BC, they came, and they're the ones that just wiped out the city completely. And then they came back in, and what happened was, when you had a Roman soldier that did something really good, and they wanted to say, oh, you did really good, what we're going to do is give you, okay, this is the fighting. You've probably heard of the fighting between Athens and Sparta. You might have heard that, Peloponnesian Wars. And so that's what this is depicting, and that's when it got wiped out. And so then you had, the Romans decided, after it had been vacant for over 100 years, that they would give it to a Roman soldier that stood up and did really great stuff, and so they did that. And so when he came in, Julius Caesar came in 44 BC, so it was, 106 years later. He came in, and it got moved, not right on the edge, but back a little bit. So where you go today to see the remains of Corinth is back off the sea. Not far, but it is back off a little bit. Here's a great picture of old Julius himself that's there in the city of Corinth. And so Corinth got built up, and it got really new, and everything was great, because it had been devoured 102 years later. So you've got these new people that are coming in all of the time, and so that's where the gods were able to come in, and they'd say, this God does this, and this God does that. So when Paul gets here, it's just right for him to come in and talk about God, because there's new people there that haven't heard anything. So he didn't have the big Jewish following that he normally had, because these people didn't know anything about God's one way or the other. So he arrives, and then he has this new city, and so he can start new traditions. And so the new tradition is, oh, come hear about Christ. Come see what we're doing here. It wasn't like he was in a place that he had to change that didn't have anything new. They had all of these new ideas, and so this was up on top of the hill. And you can see, this is the area I was trying to show you last week, the big green patch, and that's where everybody stood to talk about stuff and discuss everything they had to discuss. And you can see why standing out in front of this big building would give you some credibility to be able to do that. And so this is where Paul was as he would go talk to them. Now what's important, and we read this in the first lesson, is that there was Apollo and, not Apollo, there was, I'm missing on their first two names. Can you look those up for me real quick? Priscilla and Aquila. They were tent makers, and so that is how Paul was able to live there a year and a half. It certainly wasn't on the good news and the stuff he was doing as far as God. It was because he was able to make these tents and have a way to support himself. And so that's how Aquila and Priscilla got to be important with him. And because he was able to be there so long, he was able to spread the gospel really easy. And so that's what he did. And this is where he starts his letter writing to the other churches that he had visited prior to that. And so it really allowed him, by staying in one place, to get everything done. But you have to see how everything had to work together for that to happen. Because if they hadn't had that 4 miles there, then it wouldn't have been able to happen as easy, because that allowed the crossroads to be pregnant, just ready for him to come. So this is just fast forwarding these next slides, fast forwarding quickly, and what you'll see in them when they come up, they have now cut this through. They cut this through the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, and so this is that what used to be on land is now on the ground. Isn't that gorgeous? The water's beautiful. You can't get big ships through it, but go on to the next one. And so you can see how it goes out. Just keep going through them. It's basically the same shot, but isn't that beautiful? And so this road, or obviously this waterway is still there. So what we get out of today's sermon is that when things happen in our lives, it didn't just happen because it happened. It happened because a million bajillion things happened all at once to let that happen. So we just lift that up to God and just thank God every day that God's with us when the good things are good and that God's with us when the good things are bad. And all God's people say, amen.